All right. G'day, everyone. This is Rangadad. Not financial advice, just the way I'm looking at the market. This is just my daily market scan before I start my workday. Yeah, kind of still grinding up. Description, is it time to short the dull market? Doesn't look that way yet. In fact, it's actually looking kind of bullish on the higher time frames. So that's despite some weakness in US stocks, which we'll get to in a second. But basically, you've got BBWP is increasing and above the signal line. Your bullish smart money indicators green. Your stochastic momentum is to the upside, and it had a pretty decent bounce near this trend line. In fact, you could probably, to be honest with you, that ended up being a pretty good trend line if you just looked at these more recent ones. So that's actually would give us an indication that the market's going down further to cross back below this trend line. But for the time being, I have a feeling for at least the next week, yeah, maybe even into the start of January, we could still be in this bullish control zone, which plays in pretty well with that dump around inauguration. But for the time being, Bitcoin is bullish. One thing that we did hit, sorry for the mess here, but I wasn't super happy that this tagged the top pivot on a wick, particularly a wick on a single 1 hour candle like this, big wick. But it did tag it. So people who had a buy order in there would have been pretty happy with the result. But yeah, it seems to have done its thing and then moved on. We do have an interesting level here at 108 and a half. The next one is up around 120, which is very interesting because 120 is a fairly key level. I think it's another one that everyone's talking about, similar to the 100K, probably not as much as 100K, but it's definitely something people are talking about now. We do have a lot of divergences though, which are a little bit concerning, I guess. I don't know what that's doing. So we do have divergence on this here. We may actually pull back a little bit today, and some of the shorter time frames are suggesting this as well. But in general, sorry, the higher time frames are still pretty bullish. No real divergence here. That was a good little divergence at the bottom there. Bit of a divergence at the top here, which did lead to a pullback, but at the moment, this is just a sort of continuation bounce. Last week's high was at 103.909. Probably find some resistance around that as well if we get there. Yeah, in general, going pretty good. Now, what else do I want to point out on this one? Probably not a lot. There is actually a breakout in here as well. So we have broken this little trend line with a retest as well. So that's all good. We are getting some stopping volume here though at the moment. So this is suggesting we probably pull back and probably into the 50 on the 1 hour. Potentially anyway, that'd be better if this held. There's not a lot for it to come back into here in terms of vectors on the 1 hour. But if we hold up around the 102,700, then that'd be a pretty good level to bounce and continue on from. What do we got in there? 101,700 is the value area high. That probably would find some buyers as well, I would think. Just we do have a fair bit of volume that's come in around that level as well, maybe even down to 101. But generally, this is a pretty good trend on the hourly. Now, BTC longs, people are still taking profit on the way up here. So we haven't like fully reset to the base level that we got to down here at the top of the last run. But we're not far away. So I think once we do get another sort of push up and we see these reset, then I have a feeling we are gonna have a decent pullback because these guys aren't going to buy in at the highs. They're going to wait for pullbacks to start happening. Like they didn't really start getting back into the market here until it was a pullback of about 15%. And as you can see, they just built up their positions each dip from there. Don't expect us to go into as big a consolidation as we were in previously. I have a feeling it'll be a month and a half, 2 months. 2 months at most, I would say. But we'll see what happens when we get there. But yeah, that's sort of what I suspect's happening at the moment. All right, let's have a quick look over at a few things here. So CoinGlass super charts. One thing we have seen here is a bit of an uptick in the spot cumulative volume delta. If you remember the last video, I was sort of looking at this thinking, well, we're going up, but the CVD is still negative on spot. It was going up a little bit on the overall. So basically take into account leverage as well, futures markets, which I guess kind of did lead the way a little bit, which just shows you that futures markets are kind of governing this a little bit, which is a little bit concerning as well, because that can lead to pretty decent pullbacks when it all falls apart. So, yeah, but this is a good sign for this part of the run that the CVD has started to go positive again. Kind of like, you want to see it preferably have a bit of a spike. And you probably will if we do get a pump like this, you will see a spike. But yeah, in general, that's looking reasonably bullish. Open interest has also jumped quite a bit without much of a move. The only issue here is it looks like people might be shorting it. Um, the amount of red on the bid ask delta, there's a lot of ask coming in, so that's suggesting we will get a little pullback. I do suspect it'll just be a little pullback into that 101 sort of area, but yeah, probably a little pullback is on the cards. Funding rates are still positive. We haven't seen a negative funding rate since there's that 14th of September, this whole run up. Nothing really to write about there. You do want to be careful. If this does spike, that's probably going to suggest there's going to be a wipeout like this again. As you can see, once it starts to spike, that's getting close to the local top, or at least the end of a big push up. But it's good that we're having this move without the funding rates spiking much. So CoinAnk, just on. So I got the large orders set to 2 million minimum, just to thin this out a little bit. Big order block still around 97 to 98 half. Not a hell of a lot below. The big ones just come in here. That's a decent one in there, about 102. Then yeah, a little bit down into here, the 101 400, and then 101. So there's a little bit of interest below, but there's still a lot of sell orders coming in up here. So 104 400, potentially a little bit of a top as well. Expect some pullbacks there. But yeah, as we've said, on the way up, 105, 110, and the 120 mark, going to have some fair bit of resistance. Not getting a hell of a lot of read off here. We are getting some topping signals out of the funding, but not huge ones. And as you can see, it's just plowed straight through them. And I think these are so green because we haven't had that many in the previously that have been anywhere near that big. But you compare it to that one, and they'll be pretty pretty light green, I would say, if not black. Just can't zoom out enough to get them all in. On the one. Yeah, so the 1 hour shows that was a much bigger spike than what we've had recently, even obviously compared to this run up as well. Pretty low. Yes, on the 1 hour it looks a little bit more crowded with orders, but just get to the 15-minute at this stage. Yeah, definitely going to have some overhead resistance. Need some pretty decent orders coming through for it to push through them. Liquidation levels, as you can see, coming in here, 100,700 is going to be a pretty key level. If we get that low, there's plenty of liquidity to soak up before that, though, as well. So I think probably one more run, well, potentially one more run to the downside to pick this up, and then we try and break through. Take out a lot of shorters, suck in a lot more shorters as well, just to get a bit more shorting in there. That's fairly good at the moment, though. Yeah, it might come in here, grab some liquidity, and then run to the upside. As you can see, there's a fair bit through the 105 level, so I would expect it if we do start really getting into this around the 104 level. I would expect it to keep going up into the 105 at least, and then probably have a bit of a pullback just to make that extra all-time high. Tricky when you get to all-time highs, though. It can generate some heavy buying, which could push it quite a bit higher. So it's not the time to be shorting, really. It's still buying the dip time at the moment. Quick look at a few things. So XLF, financial sector is getting some bids, it looks like. They came in a little bit here after the drop, a little bit further of a drop, and they've come in pretty hard. So that's interesting. This is one of the more traded ETFs over the Friday session as well. So that's kind of not a bad thing. The financial sector is going to go up. It's generally a sign that the market wants to be bullish. This is a little bit concerning, though. It's whether these guys know something we don't. You'd think this one here was a buy just after the pullback there. You'd think these would take profits, though, sells. And the same with these. Like, I would have thought they'd take profits, which is a little bit ominous for Bitcoin. At the same time, they weren't buying this dip down here. Just see if I can see if they were on slightly smaller trades. Yeah, okay. So there's a fair bit of action on the dips here still. Probably just people trading this reasonably actively at the moment. Probably the bigger indication is that Coinbase seems to be getting some interest at the pullback. I think this is probably the signal that things are going to be more bullish at the moment. ProShares one's getting a few orders around here as well. So that's, again, that doesn't look great, but Ethereum's really got to break above this level, I think. Just a lot of trades coming in around here, both after pullbacks and before pumps. Like it's weird that they weren't buying in at this level. That's the thing that concerns me here. There's just nothing in the top 5. Let's see if there's anything in the top 10. Nice tiny little one down here. That's probably a buy, but they'd be pretty happy with that too. Yeah, just some weird action on the ETFs at the moment. XLY, so consumer discretionary, is looking okay still. Like consumer discretionary has been going pretty nuts over the last month. That's a pretty good run up. So this is certainly taking some profit, but the way it's trading in here at the moment, I still think it's got a little bit to go. But just be careful, because if we come into something that FX Evolution pointed out, I want XLY. Yeah. Just gonna try and get this right. That's not what I expected. It's the right one, that's why. Ah, fuck it. I'll do it later. But if you have a look at FX Evolution's video, he looks at I think it's XLY versus the S&P 500, and it looks like it's actually about to break down through a key level, and that's probably going to be an indicator that things are going to go south as well. But let's have a look at the rest of the market. So the Qs still hit another high. Pretty sure that's another all-time high on the Nasdaq. What's that close? 21,780, 21,763. Yep, another all-time high. While equal weight is still pulling back, and it still looks like it wants to pull back a little bit more. So what you don't want is this BBWP to start spiking while this is pulling back. That would kind of look not great. SPY looks like it's rolling over a little bit. This is only just broken into the out of the bullish control zone. Last time it did that, it actually went up from there. If you look at the last time it broke out of the bullish control zone, it actually turned on a dime. But volatility was still quite high as well. Yeah, that was a weird area for it to turn from. But it would have been on a news event. I guess the biggest concern at the moment is this is still pointing down. So the advanced decline line is still coming down. We want this to bounce reasonably soon. This is probably still a proxy for what we're doing at the moment. Yeah, we want to see this turn around pretty soon, I think. As you can see, that led to a pretty decent dump, but at the same time, it was actually in the bearish control zone at the time, and it was after a decent run down. So yeah, we may still just get a little bit of down into this trend line here. It's kind of looking that way, but as we can see from this, the SPY can turn around pretty quick. Especially if there's lots of bears trying to short it, or if it goes into positive gamma on the options. Equal weight has hit our trend line too, so that is an interesting level. If we break below that level has held, well, that trend line has held obviously since August. That is a pretty decent trend line. Just see if this extends down to here. No. It's probably not going to extend into much, but I would think that if we do break it, that's probably going to be the next trend line to look out for. And then we've got another one up through here as well. Oh, interesting. That could come into play so what I'm going to be looking at for next year in particular is a lower high on this market. So basically pull back, come back up, and then pull back down again without taking a new all-time high. If we do that on the daily time frame, then that's probably going to be a pretty good topping signal for the stock markets in general. Another little trend line there. I don't think that'll get hit. Don't think it comes into there either. No. But anyway, that's looks a bit messy now, but there's some key levels to look out for. I do suspect that this is probably something that'll happen. Whether we actually bounce here, come back up, then pull back down, do a bit of this. I have a feeling that's probably more likely at this stage, just looking at everything as a whole. But that's just the gut feeling at the moment. IWM needs to find some support here, I think. And it's coming in pretty hard to that level. Momentum's resetting, so that's not bad. BBWP is increasing though, so kind of need to see that momentum switch pretty early this week. XLI is doing the same. Has broken below this level here, so you would expect XLI to have another couple of down days at least, or one or two, back into 136 as a minimum. We'll probably come back down into the 100 EMA here. Pretty decent. This is actually pretty decent bullish divergence. So you've got lower lows here on momentum. And at the moment, you've got higher lows here. So if we can find a base somewhere above this level, then that would actually be quite bullish on XLI. We want that to be, it's not really vector support, but it's just support. If we find a high above that, then that would be quite bullish, I think. So equal weight, consumer discretionary versus staples. This looks like it's topping. Again, it's not like this is well and truly out of that bullish control zone, and it's coming down pretty hard. But BBWP is dropping. We haven't had a significant drop yet, so this is suggesting that, like, yeah, we might get a decent flush, but it's not dropping. It doesn't look like it's going to drop particularly hard. So to find a base somewhere up in the 1.7 level, 1.72, 1.73, somewhere around there, is still pretty bullish for the market. And when I'm saying bullish at the moment, I'm still very cautious around start of January. I think just that it looks like the Santa rally may still come this year. Of course, looking at the divergence between the S&P 500 and global liquidity, so global liquidity in orange here, versus S&P 500, and even versus Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't tend to go well when global liquidity is dropping. So just be careful of this. I think whatever we do get, if we do get a pump in the next couple of weeks into the end of the year, then the next correction is going to be a pretty decent one. I'd say at least 10-15% on the S&P 500 and probably 30% on Bitcoin, somewhere around those numbers. Because yeah, we don't see too many huge divergences. As we said, July 21 was the first one in that run, and then there was another one up this high here, so November 21. Once we start seeing those sort of divergences between global liquidity and S&P 500, there tends to be a correction on the horizon. Not necessarily straight away, but this one here, even in the short term, did actually lead to 3-4%. Yeah, potentially a quick little pullback and then another run up. But actually, what was that time frame? So the pullback only happened over like a week there, and then the run up after that was nearly a month. That's interesting. So yeah, mid-Jan could be more like mid-Jan rather than early Jan, but yeah, I'll be looking out for that. And then yeah, I do expect decent pullback, and then another run up on both the S&P 500 and Bitcoin. That was a 7% pullback, 8% pullback, then another run up of 16%. So, that's something to keep an eye out for. That's definitely a pretty decent divergence there. The KRE is pulling back, so regional banking looks like it's trying to start to find a bit of upside. So again, if we do get a pullback this week, I don't expect it to be massive on the S&P 500, but it's probably money's going to shift into different sectors. The only thing with KRE is this massive gap here. That's kind of concerning, but see what happens. ITB, this home builders is really starting to struggle. Might get a little bounce, but I think it's this one here, right? Yeah, I'm still kind of expecting this to play out. And this is an indicator that we're reaching the end of the bull cycle, like the macro bull cycle. Semiconductors got a little bid on Friday, but a bit of a doji there. So momentum's starting to tick back to the upside. This is actually looking reasonable for semis. DJI Gold looks like it's picking back up. Bit of a fake out there. Watching that reasonably closely as well. Finally fixed the DJT Gold, so it's doing the same sort of thing. Although it could just be confirming this M pattern here as well. In general, if this plays out like that, then again, it's just another sign that the overall economy is not looking great. And this could come right back up into the 200 there. DJT's broken a key level there and confirmed it. So this, again, it's kind of suggesting economy's not great. In fact, we haven't pulled back on the S&P and the NASDAQ yet. It's a little bit surprising, but as you can see, it's the equal weight doing it. Mag 7's still getting a bid at the moment, so people are going into the value stocks at the moment. VIX, still not doing much. I kind of want to see at least a spike up into 20 and then a pullback on the VIX. Until I see a bit of a spike, I'm not comfortable saying that we're going to be going on a decent run, at least on the S&P 500. But then you look at the skew, and the skew actually had a positive day again. So this is this market is just all over the shop at the moment. In fact, the skew's bounced again. Yeah, it's weird. I wanted to have a look at. Just going to jump to. Where is it? Percentage of stocks above 50. Yeah, okay. So we've hit this trend line, tagged it and bounced, which is interesting. I'd say this would actually be a pretty decent turnaround point for the majority of stocks. Just like the Russell is getting to a point where it could turn around pretty soon. It's at a support level. This is at a support level. It looks like this would be a good point for a turnaround. The equal weights are at a good support level. Maybe not the NASDAQ equal weight. It could come back a little bit more, but in general, it looks like there might be some rotation into some of the lower value stocks out of the Mag 7. Yeah, DAX is still struggling at that resistance trend line. Chinese market, again, this is being traded with leverage in the US quite a lot. So just probably a hard one to trade at the moment. If we do come back in here, yeah, I think it'll probably get a bid, but yeah, it's a messy market. It looks more bearish than anything at the moment. UK 100 pulling back still, but not dropping too much. So UK 100 actually looks like it may want to break to the upside, which is interesting. Japanese yen. Apparently the UK are buying up a heap of US bonds as well. They're now the third largest holder of US bonds, which is interesting. Japanese market looks like it kind of wants to pull back. TLT, okay, so whoops, TLT probably needs to find a bid. Whether it does or not will be pretty interesting. What wouldn't surprise me here is if it's kind of a nothing level, but just given where we're at, TLT could actually pull back quite a bit more. I'm going to go weekly on TLT. That's a nasty weekly candle there. Just to where there was a massive bid on TLT in this level here. Typically, those guys don't make too many mistakes. It doesn't go against them too much. And the weekly still, even with this little tick, it's tick sideways, really. Yeah, it's kind of, it hasn't made it out of the bearish control zone though, so TLT is kind of suck it and see. If it breaks below this low here, then could still find support around the 88 level. There is a weekly vector in there down to 84, so we could actually see it come down to there. At which point we'd be getting to the point where we'd be starting to see pullback in the US market, I think, too. So it's going to be interesting. We could actually form a big double bottom on TLT. I think this is still a pretty good buy for TLT around 83. It really depends on inflation though as well. I think that's what people are pricing in at the moment. They're thinking that inflation's hasn't gone away. It's starting to tick back up again, which we saw a 0.1 tick back up, but it seems the market is factoring that in at the moment. Interesting break below this trend line on high yield. So that's suggesting a bit of a pullback in the markets is likely. Don't necessarily have too far to go though on this. So I think if we get support around there, I'm just going to put a support level there. And of course, there is another level down here that's going to be pretty important. But if we're pulling back that much on high yield junk, then the market's going to be looking pretty nasty. So I think, again, if high yield junk did something like this, bounce back up and then pull back, you'd be getting ready to have that bigger pullback in the market in January around this point here. If we break that level, then yeah, the market's probably going to be pulling back pretty good. It's like this one here started to pull back as well. So, and again, this one's broken a trend line as well. So generally, the bond market is suggesting markets are going to weaken. 2-year 10-year is weak. The actually want to have a look at Yeah, this one's an interesting. So 3-month 10-year is a pretty good indicator of smack on. Good. Pretty good indicator of recession as well. And this is now uninverted. I had a little fake out on the uninversion a few weeks ago, but yeah, that's on the chart. I mean, we did break out below this level, but break down below that level. Yeah, generally, once this uninverts, so I did it here, October 19, and obviously once it did actually dump again. So that suggested we were going into a recession regardless of COVID, which a lot of other indicators were suggesting that. Oh, I don't have much history on that. That sucks. I'll have to look into that. There should be more history on there. I might be looking at the wrong market. Anyway, 3-month 10-year is a pretty good indicator of recession. So I'll just select the right ones next time. But yeah, this is coming down pretty hard. Let's go back to okay. So we'll do 2-year and 10-year both getting a bid still at the moment. If they break down, I mean, that's if it breaks above that, then things won't be looking good. The bond market thinks that we're going to have higher rates for longer in the US. Either that or just people don't think the US is going to be able to repay their debts and they're just getting out of US bonds. This one's potentially got a bit to run yet, the 2-year, which is bad. But copper, I mean, that's obviously dead, but yeah, copper's kind of still not making any decent highs yet. So another lower high at the moment. Momentum's back towards the downside. Again, this is suggesting a weak economy. Gold's pulling back as well, which got to be a little bit careful with gold here. It doesn't necessarily run hard when the rest of the market is pulling back, particularly when yields are going up. I think this is why gold is pulling back at the moment. Yields aren't helping it. So still think we're going to get a bid somewhere in here if it does pull back that far. So I'm not necessarily selling yet, but watching it pretty closely. Gold silver ratios pulling back, so silver's pulling back still. Silver looks a bit bearish there. I mean, gold looks pretty bearish as well, but US oil, good retest of that breakout. Looks like it wants to run. This coincides with energy markets. Actually had a bid last week, quite a big bid on the XME ETF, energy ETF. So I do expect oil to go on a pretty decent run, potentially, up 74 plus. In fact, honestly, over the next few months, I do expect this to go up to probably 80 and above. Dixie, yeah, Dixie's a tough one at the moment. It looks like it does want to come up into the 107, 108. But BBWP is dropping, so it's kind of, it's a bit hit and miss. And I think it probably will be a bit undecided until the Japanese central bank meeting. balance of trade. Oh, geez. Expecting a pretty big hit on balance of trade there for Japanese market. I think, wow, they're forecasting that the interest rate will stay the same in Japan. I have a feeling that won't happen. But yeah, that decision on the 19th is going to be pretty critical for the global markets, particularly the US market. If they do increase that interest rate, I think, and like we're getting into a point where, you know, it can stay in the bearish control zone for quite a while, but it's gearing up towards the carry trade unwind if we get a bounce in this, particularly if we get an increase in their interest rates. So, which would actually basically make it a double top on the Dixie. It's going to throw a spanner in the works. So Mag 7 looks like it's just starting to get a roll over at the top here. Yeah, I expect Mag 7 to actually pull back a little bit this week. Tesla's got a pretty massive order right at the top. And it's getting to the point of where it needs to pull back on options. Otherwise, it could squeeze again. So Tesla's been driving this quite a bit, along with Google, sorry. So yeah, I think a bit of rotation out of Mag 7 into the rest of the S&P 500, and the Russell's probably likely at this stage. So Tesla could go a little bit higher here, but I think it's pretty close to where it's going to start to pull back. Nvidia's at a pretty key level here. See if it breaks that support. If it does, then back into 116. Google looks like it's just going to make its way back down, clean up these vector candles. Google needs to find support around that level, 183. If it doesn't, then your next is 177. Apple's the only one that's still sort of looking strong. It's holding that trend line at the moment. Amazon, I'd like to see it move up and really get control of this upper trend line here. That would be extremely bullish on Amazon, but at the moment it looks like it wants to pull back in which case you're probably going to have a trend somewhere through there is going to be a decent level to pull back into. You probably take profits. If you're going to short this, which I don't necessarily suggest, that would be a good take profit level just in here. Even somewhere there, 213. Meta hasn't held that upper trend line either. There's actually might be a little bit harsh on it as a trend line, but looks like Meta's going to pull back. So it looks like Mag 7 will probably pull back. They're all at a level which would suggest that. And I think semis will probably get a bid. Like some of the bigger semis will get a bit of a bid, but generally I think the Russell's probably going to be the biggest winner. Airbnb's finally broken down. Not necessarily a great sign for economy. SMCI, I mean, yeah, most of the semis are pretty low, so semis might get bid. Stellantis is actually holding that 50 EMA, which is strange. Ford might get a bid soon too, so ASX 200's pulling back. It's potentially going to find a bit of support. Probably not there, probably somewhere around there. 8,160. Momentum's pretty well reset, but probably another couple of down days. So total crypto market cap is kind of going sideways. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Momentum is to the upside. BBWP hasn't jumped yet, so we'll see what happens. No real read off that yet. Stable coins versus Bitcoin is dropping a little, so the money is moving out of stables into BTC, it would seem. And it does, momentum is the downside on that. BBWP is just about to pop, so this does suggest upside on Bitcoin is incoming. ETH BTC longs is flatlined. ETH USD longs hasn't dropped much, so these guys are expecting a bit more of a run on ETH. Shorts are increasing a little bit. Shorts on Bitcoin are dropping off, which is good. Kind of want to see that flatline as well. And ETH BTC is pulling back at the moment. It's probably, yeah, this might pull back a little bit more if Bitcoin does go on a run. And then you'd expect it to actually bounce again and ETH take over a little bit. Bitcoin dominance, yeah, it's okay. ETH dominance, yeah. All right, this is a longer one. Sorry, start of the week. So yeah, ETH does need to hold this level and probably run from here. Not looking great though. Momentum's to the upside, but BBWP is dropping. So you kind of want to see a decent push up. Like you need ETH to go on a pretty good push. I think it's a long way from pulling back. It looks like it wants to hold this value area high. Yeah, I think it might be a bit more sideways and just grinding up on ETH before it has a run, particularly if Bitcoin's going to go on its run. CME ended up at 102,300 last week. Should be opening reasonably soon. Yeah, it actually looks like it's ticking to the upside as well, with BBWP going to the upside. So CME is kind of leading the way on this. Just out of interest, I'm going to assume we get to 120 CME and just see what a 30% pullback would look like. 35% would actually close that gap on CME. 30% would pretty well back down into that vector candle there. If we don't get that high, if we only get to 115, then that would pretty well close that gap at a 32%. So interesting levels there. But yeah, generally Bitcoin looking strong. Sol looks like it's trying to find a direction at the moment. I do kind of expect Sol to bounce here, to be honest. XRP is pretty similar. It has ticked to the upside, but BBWP is dropping. Kind of expect these to go sideways, maybe chop a little bit. I think drops in most of the cryptos are buying opportunities at the moment. Hype is just a freight train. That's hyper liquid, decentralized exchange, leverage exchange. I wish I had known that was freaking TGing actually. I just completely missed this one in October. unlucky. Yeah, a lot of these could be finding some support soon. Sui's, I think, just generally strong this market. Seems to finding a lot of interest. Anyway, I won't go into um, full altcoin analysis, but generally you're looking at Bitcoin to continue this progression at the moment. Breaks below 102 can bring us back into this into the sort of 101 level, but at the moment it's actually signaling bearish. So yeah, it could actually quite easily pull back a fair bit. Sorry for the mess on this one. This is still under development, obviously, but I tend to have quite messy indicators when I'm developing bots. But just know that this little diamond here suggests bearishness, and the fact that this ATO is actually dipping below its key level at the same time and is red, and cyclic RSI is red as well, and it's reasonably high, then chances are we get a decent pullback here. So I'm looking, yeah, could quite easily come back into 101 sort of region, which isn't great. It's kind of good buying opportunity though, I'd say. And I would agree with the rest of the market having a week, like a pullback this week into the FOMC meeting. At which point I'm kind of expecting another leg up just based on the daily momentum. I don't think this will really change that too much if we get a few days of pullback. I think just have a quick look on the 1 hour. So the 1 hour is actually, yeah, 1 hour would suggest a similar sort of level at 101, 300-ish. There's some divergence on the RSI on that as well. And on the ATO. So that, yeah, the 1 hour is kind of in confluence with the 15-minute here that pull back into 101 as a minimum. We'll see what happens around there, but I'd say at this stage it's probably not a bad buying level. Even gets there, like it wants to go up again. But yeah, no, I think longer term, that's a pullback. Over the next day, probably. Might do it quicker than that, but next day or two, pull back into 101. And then hopefully a bounce. See how we go.